Okay, super. Good evening. This is a special meeting Thursday, June 16, 2022, the Planning and Zoning Commission of New Canaan, Connecticut. Lynn, why don't you explain, this is a hybrid meeting. So Lynn, why don't you explain how you'll be running this meeting, please?
Sure. This is a hybrid meeting, so it's both virtual and in person. If you're online and virtual, we've stopped your video chat. Please keep it off. Only those who are speaking should be viewable. There are people in the room and people on Zoom. It's a public meeting tonight, so unless the commission wants to hear from the public, there is no public comment.
Okay, thank you, Lynn. Let's do the roll call. John Goodwin, I'm here. Ken Turner.
Here.
Dick Ward.
Here.
Dan Radman.
Here.
John Scorney is absent. Krista Nielsen. Ricker Cassavan.
Here.
We don't have John Engel, right?
We don't have John Engel, at least not right this second.
Chris Herring.
Here.
James Bash.
Here.
Paul Knack.
Here.
Okay, super. Item number one, we're in regular meeting mode, 824 review referral from the WPCA for a report for a location and/or extension of the municipal sewer system for property located at 751 Weed Street, map 32, block 20, lot 944 in the 1 acre zone. I would like to start by reading some remarks. So as I just noted, we're here tonight because the Board of Finance, acting as the Water Pollution Control Authority, WPCA, has asked us to render a report pursuant to Connecticut General Statutes, Section 824, regarding a proposed extension to the existing sanitary sewer on Elm Street as it approaches Weed Street. This request arises out of an application filed by 751 Weed LLC to the WPCA. Initially, the applicant sought only an allocation of sewer capacity and permission to connect to the town sewer system. However, the WPCA determined that the request included an extension of the sewer and so referred the matter to us. Section 824 is a planning statute. As such, it is our responsibility to look at the proposed sewer extension and determine whether or not good planning supports the extension. Note that this is not a hearing on the underlying application to develop 751 Weed Street with a multifamily development. That will come before us soon. Tonight requires the commission to review the proposed extension from a planning perspective and render a report. The meeting tonight is not a public hearing. While the attorney for 751 Weed will be allowed about 15 minutes to present his position, as I have stated before, we will not take public comment or questions. The commission, of course, may have questions, and we have attorney Peter Gelderman here to help us with any legal questions we may have. After we've heard from the applicant's attorney and all questions have been answered, we will discuss the referral among ourselves and hopefully direct staff with the town attorney's help to draft a report either in favor or against the proposed extension for our consideration, and we will then vote at our meeting on June 28th. Before we hear from Attorney Hollister, I will ask Attorney Gelderman to make a few opening remarks about Section 824. Mr. Gelderman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, as you said, Section 824 is a planning section. It requires municipal improvements such as an extension of a sewer to come before this body for a report. Essentially, your planning function centers around the POCD and what the POCD says from a planning perspective. So when you take a look at this proposed extension, the POCD is sort of the Bible, your guiding document to determine whether or not it should receive a positive or negative report from the commission. Keep in mind that the WPCA has already determined that this is in fact an extension. There was an issue about that at the WPCA. They voted and determined that this is an extension that required a referral to the WPCA. If it had been a mere connection, for example, you wouldn't have seen it. It's the issue of sewer capacity, things of that nature are not really in front of you tonight. That's a WPCA consideration. So as you hear the presentation, keep in mind that you're looking at this as, in effect, planners as to whether or not this is an appropriate extension from a planning point of view in New Canaan.
Any questions? Yeah,
can I
please,
ask a question?
please go ahead.
You say that the WPCA has already determined that this is an extension.
They have. That's why it's before you, but they haven't voted on whether to approve the extension yet.
Okay, but I guess my question is that if they have determined that it's an extension, are we reconsidering that, or is that something that, okay, we accept that and we go now for planning? So as far as we're concerned, it's an extension.
Correct. That was a determination by the WPCA. That's why it came before you. So at this point in time, you're dealing with an extension
Good.
and looking at it as in your planning capacity.
Any other questions for Attorney Gelderman? Attorney Hollister, I believe you have some remarks you'd like to make.
Thank you. Members, I have permission to give these to you. There's copies of things you'll see on the screen. Thank you. Good evening, Chair Goodwin, members of the Planning and Zoning Commission. I'm Attorney Tim Hollister from Hartford. With me is Leonard DeAndrea, professional engineer from RVDI in Greenwich. I just want to put a couple things on the record. First is my understanding is that the materials that you have that you will use to consider the question before you are our April 14th, 2022 sewer application, a May 31st, 2022 supplement to that, the materials that were forwarded by the WPCA dated June 9th, and then you have the town planner's memo from yesterday, which we received, and I will have a few comments on that. So that's my understanding of the, plus obviously the planning and zoning, the plan of conservation and development, as Attorney Gelderman referenced. That my understanding is that's the universe of documents that will be considered in your discussion. As noted, Attorney Gelderman did ask me to try to limit my remarks to 15 minutes, and I will abide by that. As I think you also know, the applicant is here tonight despite our vehement objection last week that this step in our sewer application process was not justified and was not warranted. So by way of explaining the application and the objection and our position on what the commission may or may not do tonight, I'd like to start with an overview of why this application has been labeled an extension by the WPCA and therefore referred to you. And I understand they've made that determination, but to understand our position, I need to spend a few minutes explaining our position on that. So the zoning application, which will start hearings next week, has been made under General Statutes 830G, the Affordable Housing Land Use Appeals Act. And as you know, 830G says that if an applicant agrees to set aside at least 30% of the proposed residential units for moderate and low-income households for a period of 40 years, and the commission denies the application and the applicant goes to court, the burden shifts to the commission in court to demonstrate that its denial was based on a substantial public health or safety concern. In a sewer application, of course, well, maybe not of course, but however, if an application is denied and the denial is appealed to the court, there is no burden shifting. The applicant must prove that a denial was not based on substantial evidence in the record of the hearing before the WPCA, and that's the hearing that started June 7th. In addition, there is a 2004 Connecticut Supreme Court case called Avalon Bay versus Milford, where an apartment developer asked the court to order the city to allow it to extend a sewer line almost a mile with rock excavation and blasting required almost all along the route. And the court declined to issue an order and held that a sewer extension is a discretionary act, or at least was in the context of the environmental and engineering concerns of that case. How far that the rule about extensions being discretionary applies in other cases like this one, I think Attorney Gelderman and I would agree is somewhat of a gray area. So anyway, the town staff, WPCA and the town attorney over the applicant's objection said that this application is an extension, and we believe it is so they can argue that the WPCA has discretion to deny and that any appeal will not be governed by 830G. That is why, that is what's going on here and why we believe we are here. Now, on June 7th at the WPCA, we explained our objection, why this application is not an extension, not subject to referral under 830G. And this is, I think, important for you to understand as you take up the question that is before you. Number one, the town had, HAD had discretion to extend the sewer system to, in 1959, and did so with respect to 751 Weed Street. And a copy of that letter granting permission expressly to extend the sewer system is tab 2A of our April 14th sewer application. So the property is therefore today already connected to the public sewer system, albeit through a private easement. And Lynn, if you could put up the diagram, that would help at this point. Is already connected to the public sewer system, albeit through an easement to the east of 751 Weed Street, through two properties east and then into Elm Street. So on the diagram that you're looking at, it is the blue line that extends from 751 Weed Street on the left to the east and then to the south, and the connection at that exactly that point on Elm Street. The current proposal is nothing more than to move the connection point from the private property parallel to Elm Street into Elm Street, which is shown in the red line, and the new portion is the dashed line, just that portion right there. The other part of the red line is, those are existing manholes within Elm Street. So this is the new pipe is only 130 feet long, and there's one new manhole. The move is very simple physically. There are no engineering issues that have arisen in the staff reviews or obviously in the applicant's reviews. Very important to note that moving the connection point will not require or allow any new properties to connect to the public sewer system. It will not expand or alter the universe of properties, sometimes called the sewer service area, because all of the properties north, south, and east of the intersection of Weed and Elm are already sewered. All the properties west of Weed Street are on septic, and there is no plan to change this, and the application will not change that in any way. So the fact of an additional 130 feet within a public street does not create an extension of the system, of the sewer system, if no new properties will be added to that system. Now, you've probably read so far that moving the connection, this is more of an aside, but it's important, I think, in some ways. Moving the connection is the applicant's preference, because 751 Weed Street has a right to continue to discharge sewage for the proposed apartments through the existing private easement. The easement allows it. The existing pipe is adequately sized. The additional discharge will be completely underground with no impact on the private properties over which the easement exists, which is why this will not overburden the easement, which was an argument that we heard last week. Now, moving the connection point makes sense from an engineering point, because it will make maintenance easier for the applicant. It will relieve the adjoining private properties of anyone having to come in and dig up a pipe or excavate if there's maintenance to be done. And it makes it easier for the town because the property is more accessible. On top of that, the town has an existing sewer rule. New Canaan has sewer rules and regulations. Section 327 covers the exact situation of this application, modifying a connection point to accommodate a greater volume of sewage discharge. That is called a reconnection and not an extension by the town's own regulations. In addition, Town Ordinance 51-1 requires every property with sewer available, and sewer is certainly available to 751 Weed Street, to be connected to the sewer system. Now, as Attorney Gelderman pointed out, and the chair in your opening remarks, General Statutes 824 is part of the state planning statutes. In an 8-24 referral, which is what you're doing tonight, your task is to issue an advisory report You do not have a veto. A negative report tonight is not a veto and does not relieve the WPCA of having to make a decision on the merits. You issue an advisory report on whether the utility proposal is consistent with the town's plan of conservation and development. So a sewer application, in our view, only needs to be referred if it proposes to extend a public sewer system to a new property or properties, as I said, to expand the sewer service area. Planning is understood as the coordinated orderly development of land and infrastructure. So when an 824 referral is needed, it's because you're changing the scope of the sewer service area. By comparison, a sewer application like this one that only involves a reconnection of a sewer property in a sewer, that's a sewer system management issue, not an 824 planning issue. I would also point out that your town engineer has now stated several times, including in her May 31st memo, which was part of the WPCA package, and on June 7th last week, that there are no known issues, her words, no known issues with capacity or functioning of the town sewer system from Elm Street to the treatment plant. Now, frankly, the WPCA did not give credence or weight to anything we said on June 7th. They gave no reason for their referral other than saying this is an extension, no explanation, no merits response to the things that we pointed out as I've just summarized. But because respectfully, the WPCA's referral here makes no sense and has no justification, it sets up tonight a unguided proceeding, and I'll explain why. The first is, as Attorney Gelderman, I'm glad to say that we agree. Tonight's referral is not about the proposed apartments, but only the sewer application, the new pipe 130 feet and the manhole. Now, I would just emphasize that here's what Attorney Gelderman said in a February 2022 memo to the commission, and I agree with this. He said, quote, "For the WPCA, it is simply a question of reviewing an application for a multifamily development as if the property were zoned for multifamily use. In other words, the WPCA should not consider land use criteria, including zoning compliance," unquote. And you obviously, since you're reviewing the decision of the WPCA, you're in the same position with the same instructions and the same same limitation. So, and as Attorney Gelderman said, you're not reviewing the sewer capacity because that is clearly a WPCA issue that has not been and should not have been referred over here. So the only issue tonight is whether moving the sewer, as illustrated, from private property into Elm Street is consistent with the POCD. But the POCD, and this is shown in the handout that I gave you, has no sewer plan. In fact, in page 90, part of what I just gave you, it says New Canaan, this is from 2014, of course, New Canaan should consider adopting a sewer limit line and or a sewage allocation scheme, unquote. 8 years later, the town has not done so. There is, of course, a GIS map that you can generate from your computer showing the sewer mains, but that's not part of the POCD. And the town planner's memo has a map prepared in 2018 by the firm of Ty and Bond, but that is not a sewer system memo, and it's also not part of the POCD. So your POCD says absolutely nothing about moving an existing sewer connection to an already connected property from private land onto the public street, and especially about a sewer modification that does not alter or expand which properties will obtain sewer. Now, the town engineer said in her June 7th remarks and also in her May 31st memo, quote, "The town has no plan to extend the sewer within Elm Street," quote unquote. But she doesn't mean the town has a plan and the plan is not to install a longer sewer within Elm Street. What she means is there's no plan either way. There's simply no plan for 751 Weed Street and adjacent parcels because there is no need for a plan. Again, all the properties along Weed are sewered and the west of Weed are on septic, and there's no proposal to change that. So in the PZC, in its planning / consistency, POCD consistency function has nothing to review. There's nothing in the POCD that needs or warrants a report about this very small, de minimis, inconsequential change to the route of an existing sewer discharge. Now, notwithstanding our agreement that the apartments are not before you, I'm going to point out to you that in the materials that I gave you, the excerpt from the POCD, page 93, the future land use plan regarding housing in or near downtown identifies 751 Weed Street as projected for medium density for residential development and states that 751 Weed Street is within one of the town's, quote, best sites for higher density development, unquote, that will help promote the development of a vibrant downtown. That is in your POCD. So where we end up, and I'll conclude with this, except for a few remarks about the town planner's memo. If you're to look at this sewer reconnection and to find that it is inconsistent with the POCD and issue a negative report, respectfully, you're going to have to ignore everything we just pointed out in terms of facts and law and limits of your authority. You'll have to deny this application because it proposes affordable housing, which would violate the state and federal Fair Housing Acts, or you'll deny it because the sewer will support multifamily housing, which would violate your town attorney's direction, and the law that says the town cannot use sewers to dictate land use, or perhaps you would be forced into a so-called pretextual basis where your stated reason is not the actual reason, which would be contrary to your obligation as an administrative agency to provide your actual reasons, or some combination of the above. So you are in a difficult position. I would ask that if you do issue a negative report, you be very specific about what your reason or reasons are and cite specific pages of the POCD that you believe support your resolution. My view is, and maybe Attorney Gelderman agrees or disagrees, my view is you do have the option of not issuing any report or taking any position if you believe that is the appropriate thing to do. So in summary, that is why this application has no basis being before this commission. Now, I'll finish with just three quick comments on Ms. Brooks Avni's memo of yesterday. On page 3, she points out that the residential densities map, not the future land use plan, the residential densities map in the POCD states that the density where 751 Weed Street is located should be 1 unit per acre or less. Respectfully, that's not correct. The 1.0 is the current density in the zoning regulations. The future land use map, which I just referred to, says that the vicinity of 751 is an appropriate area for higher density housing, more than 1 unit per acre. It says actually is 1 unit per acre or higher. In addition, the town planner's memo says that the 2018 tie-in bond map shows the sewer system. That's not correct. I believe it's like the GIS map shows the properties that are adjacent to a sewer main and could achieve a direct connection through a lateral. But the tie-in bond map and the GIS map do not show any of the parcels along Weed Street that are connected to the sewer system at the current time, some north and some south of the intersection of Weed and Elm. So it's clearly not a sewer map because it's not complete. And so we do not agree with that characterization. And finally, the memo suggests that the 1959 extension to 751 Weed Street, quote, was not the same property as exists today, unquote. Well, that's true because in 1959, the parcel was, I believe, 7 or 8 acres, and it has been subdivided and re-subdivided, and sewer easements have been granted accordingly. But Arthur Watson was the predecessor entitled to the current property owner and applicant, and the house at 751 Weed Street was built in the 1920s, and that is what was sewered through the extension that was granted in 1959. I thank you for your attention. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Excuse me, any questions for Attorney Hollister?
I do. You quoted something in the POC that you said it specifically says that the property at 751 is prime for higher density. Where was that quote?
That is on page 66. It's and it's in the handout that I gave you. It's the second page. But it's, if you look under page 66, which says provide for a diverse housing portfolio, and then the third paragraph that begins with areas such as these, and that refers to,
It doesn't specifically define 751.
no, it
It
says
just-
there's
But
an,
you said that. You,
I said the area, the vicinity where it is, and that's
Uh-huh.
shown on the map.
correct.
It doesn't call out
It-
except
it
if you by
generali-
address.
Sorry, let me finish. So it generalizes that the areas that are adjacent to public water and public sewer are suitable sites for higher density.
Correct.
Okay. So what defines higher density?
Well, the P O C D defines it as more than 1 unit per acre.
No, that's medium density.
Well, that's what it says.
I asked higher density.
What P O C D means for higher density? I don't
Uh-huh.
know. I don't know that I have that in
I
my,
can tell you, higher density is areas presently used or potentially future used for multifamily development.
right.
What do you consider 751's proposal to be?
What do I consider?
What,
The
what
sewer
type,
propo-
what type of use is the proposed building at 751 considered to be?
Apartments.
Multifamily.
Yes,
Okay, thank you. So it's higher density.
yes.
Okay.
Or medium.
No, it's not medium, it's higher density. It's multifamily. When we're talking about medium density, we're talking about residential densities where there's 1 unit per acre or higher, where there's possibly 1 unit per half acre or 1 unit per quarter acre. It does not define medium density as being multifamily. That's higher density, clearly.
I'm not sure that's clear, but okay. We can.
It
we
says
can
it in
agree
black
to
and white on
disagree.
this page.
Okay, we can.
It's part of
agree
your
to disagree.
handout. So one more question.
May I finish, Mr.
Sure.
Madden? The paragraph on page 66 that I quoted does not make the distinction that you made. It just talks about appropriate best sites for higher density development. And
Yeah, no, I understand.
that's the wording.
No, what I was referring to, I thought I heard you say that this particular site is defined by the P O C D as,
I did not say, and it's not
You're clear.
going to imply it's called out by address. It's called out by area.
understood. Okay. Then you were describing impact to the sewer system, the system specifically. And that in your opinion, because no additional properties are added to the system, that there's no impact.
Right.
Is that how impact to the sewer system is defined? By number of lots? Or is it by usage and density?
Well, from a planning standpoint, my point is that if there's a change in the sewer system that doesn't affect anything relating to planning, the number of lots or the density or anything like that, that it's not a planning issue that belongs in a referral under 824. That was my point.
Okay. But in this particular case, there would be an impact to the sewer system, wouldn't there?
No,
So adding 100 units to an existing sewer system,
well, there's
I know
more.
it's on one property, but
Yes, but I believe Attorney Gelderman and I agreed that's not before you. That was not part of the referral. I mean, yes, there's more discharge if there's 102 apartments and there's one single family home. Yes, obviously, but
Okay.
that's not an impact to the sewer system in the planning sense.
okay. And last question, what defines an extension of the sewer system to you?
Well,
I know you're saying that yours is not. What would be an extension?
an extension would be, let's say, if, for example, the town of New Canaan extended, well, we don't have the map up anymore. If you extended it to the west side of Weed Street and all those properties that are now on septic, we're told that you now need to connect to the sewer system. That would be a planning issue that would require this type of referral. But where you're not doing anything, you're not changing the properties that are connected, or you're not expanding or altering the sewer system, then you don't have an extension.
And by virtue of the definition of extension, the negative impact of that type of an extension is an additional capacity load on the system, correct?
Well, I think that's kind of lumping the two issues together.
I know it
Together
is.
as we were, well, okay, yeah, I mean, but the discharge, the increase in the discharge that would result from, for example, extending the sewer system west of Weed Street is not an issue that would be referred to you under 824. That stays at the WPCA.
Anybody else? Good, thank you, Attorney Hollister.
Thank you.
Attorney Gelderman, any, in light of Attorney?
I have a question, if I may. This is Paul Canog.
Attorney Hollister, he's on Zoom, if you don't mind, please.
You didn't see my lips move, did you?
Here I am.
Go ahead,
So,
Mr.
the question is this, you claim that you have a right to use the easement, the private easement for the sewer connection to your property, is that right?
That's correct.
And you claim that there's no overburdening of the easement?
That's correct.
And that's true even though as a result of this easement, it would facilitate construction of 100 units next door to the property on which this easement has been granted?
Yes, as I explained earlier, the text of the easement allows it. There's no limitation on the use or replacing or maintenance. The pipe size been determined by Mr. DeAndrea's firm to be adequate for 102 apartments. And the discharge will be obviously underground, sight unseen, which is why there will be no impact to the private properties. So
Is the deed that grants the easement, is that part of the record?
it's on the town website. It has been for several months. Which is why I didn't put it in my materials because it's.
Mr. Chairman, is that easement part of the record of this matter?
Lynn,
I mean, it can be added, it can be added into the record.
would you grab
I
that?
would request that, and there's also in the easement, there's a reference to a map. And I'd like to have that map included in the record.
That's fine.
Okay. Anybody else?
I have a
Okay.
follow-up question on the easement. It's Kent Turner. The building in relationship to the existing easement, as far as the line itself, does that fall over the easement? Would you have to move the buildings? How would you be able to avoid building over the easement?
No, the building does not go over the easement. The proposed building does not go on top of the easement at any location.
Okay, everybody good?
Mhm.
Okay, thank you, Attorney Hollister. Attorney Gelderman, thoughts on Attorney Hollister's comments?
Yeah, I think the first thought I have is whether Attorney Hollister agrees with what the WPCA did or not. The fact is they determined this was an extension and referred it to this, to the Planning and Zoning Commission for its report. Now, 8-24 doesn't make a distinction between what kind of extension or location of a sewer is subject to an 8-24 report. It simply says that a municipal agency, in this case, the WPCA, no municipal agency shall locate or extend public utilities and terminals for sewage until the proposal to take such action has been referred to the commission for a report. So I understand that Attorney Hollister wants to distinguish between what kind of an extension this is. But it's an extension in the sense that there's no sewer there now. There's no sewer in Elm Street at this location. There will be if the sewer is extended. So at the very least, it's being located there, which is the language of the statute. So I don't think it's appropriate for the it's the plain reading of the statute. as far as I can tell. I mean, that's what it provides. So I think that it is an appropriate municipal improvement. Once that sewer is built, it's going to be, if it's built, it's going to be maintained in perpetuity by the town, not by the property owner. So it becomes part of the public sewer system. And to the extent it ever needs to be maintained, it needs to be maintained by the town of New Canaan, not by any property owner who happens to benefit by that section of pipe. The town engineer obviously came to that conclusion as well, and the WPCA came to that conclusion as well. So from my perspective, it's fairly clear that the statute doesn't make a distinction between what kind of extension it is. It's an extension of a main, of a sewer main. It's not there now. It's proposed to be there. I don't see how you can read the statute another way. I don't disagree that 751 Weed Street is served by a private easement right now. That's a fact. So it's got sewer service. And I understand Attorney Hollister's position that, well, from a, what's the planning purpose then? If it's already served by a sewer through a private easement, what's the planning? And it won't service any other properties. What's the planning issue? Actually, that's for you guys to decide. But I know what the statute says, and you need to consider it and write a report. Your report may conclude that there's no planning impact. I don't know what your report would conclude, but I do know that the statute requires a location or extension of a sewer to be referred to this body. Another thing I wanted to reference, Attorney Hollister said that you don't have to render a report. Well, if you don't render a report, it's deemed to be an approval. It's deemed to be a positive report. So yeah, you always have that option, but then you're rendering a positive report if you decide not to render a report. You have 35 days, by the way, from the date of the referral. So I think the timing of the next meeting, if that's the vote, satisfies that 35-day requirement. There are no extensions permitted under 8-24, unlike some of your, site plan, special permit type of applications. So you need to vote within that period of time. And he also used the phrase, Attorney Hollister used the phrase unguided procedure. Well, it's not unguided. It's guided by the POCD and by this body's collective determination of planning considerations and what those are or should be with respect to this extension. I do agree, and I said it at the beginning, that the ultimate, this is not, we're not here to judge the viability of the development plan. However, the development plan is part of the ultimate application that was submitted to the WPCA. So you certainly are able to look at the fact that there are proposed to be 102 units, a multifamily development on this site. You're not making a determination as to whether that's an appropriate development at this point in time or not. But in the context of this sewer extension, that is a relevant factor. So again, without deciding whether that's an appropriate use of the property. So, and one other thing, I just took a few notes here. Attorney Hollister said that in reviewing the decision of the WPCA, he said, that's a quote, he said, in reviewing the decision of the WPCA, you should, blah, blah, blah. He didn't say blah, 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 but you're not reviewing the decision of the WPCA. You're not a review board here. You're actually rendering an advisory opinion to the WPCA. You're not deciding whether they're right or wrong, whether you agree that this is an extension or not an extension. You're not reviewing that decision. You're rendering an advisory report, and it is advisory and it's not appealable. So whatever your report says, it's not like a decision you make in a zoning application where somebody can take an appeal. There is no appeal to this. There is, and Attorney Hollister and I have gone through this dance a little bit in Westport. So I know what he's going to say. He knows what I'm going to say to a large extent. And we disagree to a large extent on what the effect of a negative 8-24 report is, but that's not for you. That's for the WPCA. That's you guys are going to render your report based on what you think is the appropriate planning considerations. But there is a process, and there's at least one Supreme Court case that says the reason that 824 reports are not appealable in their advisory is because there's another step that can be taken if the P&Z renders a negative report. And that is the town council by a 2/3 vote could in effect allow the proposal to occur. Basically, it says a proposal disapproved by the commission shall be adopted by the municipality only after the subsequent approval of the proposal by 2/3 of the city council. So that, and at least one Supreme Court case said, well, that's why this is advisory, because it's not final. But it's not appealable at any rate. So, and whether it is taken up at some point in time, if you issue a negative report by the town council, is up to powers beyond me. So anyway, those are my comments.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, through you, could I just?
Now, Mr. Hollister, we get into dueling lawyers. With all due respect, you've had your time and we're all set.
A clarification question that might help the proceeding?
If it's quick, please.
I'm sorry?
If it's quick, please.
Yes, Attorney Gelderman, I don't have the statute in front of me. You do. Does it not say that if this commission does not render any report, could be an automatic approval, but if they actually take action but not a position, that would not result in an automatic approval. Could we agree on that?
The failure of the commission to report within 35 days shall be taken as an approval. So I don't know,
Failure to issue a report that took no position would be action.
a report that took no position. I guess that would be a report. I don't see any reason why the commission would issue a report that takes no position, but
Thank you.
You're welcome. Let me ask the commissioners a question. Commissioners, are you comfortable that what we have is an appropriate municipal improvement where we should render an advisory report that the extension is consistent or inconsistent with plan of conservation development, also known as the town plan? Are you comfortable with proceeding on that basis?
Yes.
Yes, I am.
Yes.
Problem solved. Was that?
I think that was Art
Yes.
saying yes.
Art? Okay.
Okay.
Okay, time to discuss, just a couple of thoughts at my end to start. About the plan of conservation and development. I joined this commission at the tail end of the 2004 plan. Like Mr. Turner about the same time. And then many of us were fully involved in the development of the 2014 plan. And many of us sat through multiple discussions with the town. We had a planner, Glenn Childer, who was already familiar with New Canaan. He helped shepherd us through the process. And I think what resulted in 2014 was, and I guess I'm biased, but a fairly good job of putting together a town plan. We took at heart the input of the community as well as our own planning work. The thing I'll add to that is I think all of us have reviewed this plan, depending upon how long each of us have been on the commission, many, many times. So I think, we are extremely well positioned to interpret consistency and inconsistency with the town plan. Couple of thoughts that I had that perhaps I'll kick it off with is, of course, one of the challenges, and Mr. Gelderman, you can feel free to correct me, but when we're interpreting the POCD, And part of the reason why I gave this introduction is a lot of the POC deals with interpretation. Okay, how do we interpret the plan of conservation and development in terms of, you know, what's the task before us? And I guess one point I'm making is that we are extremely well versed in interpreting the plan of conservation and development. And very often, you know, and I think we've already heard it here, is you can get into arguments where you're picking off sections of the plan of conservation development. You're picking off a sentence, you're saying this, you're saying that. And, you know, it's, you know, we're going, I agree with Attorney Hollister, and we will refer to specific sections in the plan of conservation and development. But quite frankly, there is also a subjective element to that. And, you know, Attorney Gelderman and Planner Lavney, once we give them direction as to where we want to go and to what sections, you know, they'll, you know, help cut through that and compose that. One of the things I did think about is, you know, what are, you know, as opposed to subjective, and we need to discuss the subjective, but I also thought about the objective, and Attorney Hollister noted it. And it was in Planner Abney's memo. As, you know, as I go through it, two of the things that I did was I went to the map on page 57, and it's zoned as 1 unit per acre or less. And frankly, I disagree with Mr. Hollister's interpretation of that. To me, it is what it is. The second thing, you know, that I went to was then page 93, which has already been referred to, which is the future land use plan. And I don't define medium density as 102 units.
Correct.
So a couple points I just wanted to make to start, and I'll open it up to commissioners.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I have to better perhaps understand, at least for me. 751 is in a 1 acre zone, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
If 751 were to be subdivided and a new residence built in a 1 acre portion of it, and then it gets hooked into the sewer system, presumably that would be an extension. I mean, you're adding an additional residence.
It's not the addition of a residence that results in an extension, in my view. It's a physical location and extension of the sewer main. So if that property were subdivided somehow, it may not need any extension because there's already sewer service there. So
But if I look at
Right.
the map that was distributed, I mean, I can see the red line as to what is intended,
the dotted red line is the new part,
not a red line.
right?
But if,
Anything on the property is a connection versus an extension of the sewer. It's a lateral or a private connection. So within the property itself, within the private property, that is not, would not be considered to be an extension of the sewer.
if it's subdivided, then it's a new property.
It is, but it would,
And it's unlikely that the new property would just simply connect into its then neighbor so that
it would get an easement.
Which is what happened in 1996 when the
W-
property was
uh,
subdivided.
Yeah, there would be an easement granted if that were the plan. Remember, the same owner owns the property. So if he were going to subdivide the property and he intended for the rear lot, call it the northerly lot, to have access to the sewer, he would grant an easement over the southerly lot. Or at least as far as the blue easement is concerned. He would grant an easement over his own property to get access to that.
the new southerly lot might have a direct connection to the sewer system.
Well, it would if this extension is built, yes.
So
It won't if the extension's not built because it doesn't have frontage against the sewer main. The sewer main stops if you look at the map, the sewer main stops where it says sanitary sewer manhole number 1. That's where the existing sewer main stops.
Yeah,
So
okay.
751 does not have access to that.
Doesn't have frontage.
So if I understand it, Mr. Gelderman, if I'm the owner of 751 and let's say I can legally subdivide it into 2 lots. And I say, well, in order to sell this other lot for development, I can grant an easement for that lot across my property to tap into the lot line where the end of the blue line is.
Correct.
And I can do that if I want to. And again, that's a connection, not an extension.
Correct.
Use it that, and I certainly can do that. I mean, easements are granted by various people for various reasons across their property. And they can do that if they wish to, but that's not an extension
No,
per
correct.
the statements you shared with us.
Correct.
Thank you, sir.
So first a question for Mr. Gelderman. The WPCA's final determination, is that appealable?
Yes.
And then just some clarification of a section of the POCD that was referenced earlier. And I'm quoting from the POCD on page 66. So higher density multifamily development is already permitted in and near the downtown and the apartment district, the B resident district, and the business zones A, B, and C. 2-family development is permitted in the B residence district. So my understanding is the additional sewer pipe that would service of the application. That is outside of the apartment district, it's outside of the B residence district, and it's outside of business zones A, B, and C.
Yeah, that's not really a question for me.
So no, that's okay. It's not, that wasn't a question. I'm just going on. Because it goes on to say in the 4th paragraph on that page, that multifamily and or higher density developments should be discouraged in other areas. Should be discouraged in other areas outside of those areas that were delineated in the zones I just spoke of. Again, apartment district, B residence district, and business zones A, B, and C. I think it's important to reference for just the sake of balance, what the POD is saying about the section of where this additional sewer line would be constructed.
Question and clarification on the diameter of the sewer line, the existing versus the new. What is the diameter?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Yeah, we wanted to keep this as a discussion among the commission.
Okay, well then, to my fellow commissioners,
I mean, if you
If-
feel
if-
strongly and Mr.
No, no.
Hollister is comfortable, but I'd like to.
that's
Yeah.
fine. No, it's what I'm trying to determine is the new sewer line, is it required? Because the existing sewer line that goes through the easement is not big enough, or the diameter is too small to handle the effluent that will be, the sewage that will be required to be moved through that line.
They've said
So-
that, so the applicant has said that it would be enough to service the additional flow from the application,
And
the existing easement,
do we know what the dimension of that pipe is?
I think 6 inches.
6 inches, or they want to go to 8 inches, I believe.
So it raises the question, why is this such a big deal to even have
Right.
a new extension?
Right, that's what I'm trying to understand, what, why the applicant is going through this and not just use the existing line.
I have a question for Pete. So when Mr. Hollister and I were discussing definition of extension, et cetera, we need to strictly adhere to whether it's a quote unquote extension and not consider the scale of the application or the overall size of the units. But something you said was we are allowed to consider the 102 units in terms of scale relative to how it impacts this as an extension, correct?
It's within the application that was made to the WPCA. So
Got
it's,
So by virtue of Mr. Hollister's definition of an extension, what I thought I heard him say was that an extension of the sewer system is something that would allow additional housing units or properties to tie into it, which would then impact the load of the system. That's what I thought I heard him say. Wouldn't that same definition then apply to this proposed extension?
well, again, that's
That's for us to
for
determine.
your determination. Yep.
Got it. Okay.
May I make a comment?
Please, Mr. Connect.
So a long time ago, a fellow gave a easement to his neighbor to allow him to tie into the sewer line through the fellow's property. That was for one house. And it inured to his benefit because he meant he wouldn't have to have a septic system. Now, they're saying, well, we'll have 100 houses. And I think if we just had 2 houses and a subdivision, we'd have to have that wouldn't be a valid extension without approvals and a new easement. And I think with 100 houses, it's a obvious overuse of the easement. And I don't believe that it should be. I believe it's improper use of the easement and should not be allowed.
Can I just make one comment to that, Mr. Chairman? While I appreciate that, that's not really a municipal consideration at this point in time. If whether or not that easement can be utilized for 102 unit is a matter between the property owners who are either benefit or over whose property the easement runs. So that's going to be determined in a different forum, really. For our purposes, though, the applicant has made it clear that the extension of this sewer is merely a convenience and not necessary.
So you're saying that, I mean, if one reason potentially for negative referral could be that it's not needed.
I suppose, again, that's for your determination, but I think you're saying there's no planning benefit.
Right. But Mr. Connect, I think maybe you're saying it's inconsistent even for an extension to say allowing an extension is inconsistent with the plan of conservation and development because it is meeting the needs of a development that is not appropriate with the plan of conservation and development.
That's right. That's right. And it's a misuse of the easement. And
I think you mean
shouldn't be permitted.
Yeah, I think you mean a misuse of a potential extension, not the easement.
Right. Well,
We're
even
making
if it stayed exactly the same in terms of the pipe. If suddenly the pipe was serving 100 units rather than 1 unit, it would be an overuse of the easement. It's like you turn a driveway into a superhighway.
Right, but
You can't do that.
our job is to provide a negative or a positive report to the WPCA on the extension. We're not opining on the usage of the easement. But quite frankly, I agree with what you said, if you substitute extension for easement.
Okay, so I'll just jump in here and where I stand on this. I mean, as Mr. Hollister pointed out, our POCD doesn't have a lot to say about the sewer system in terms of where to extend it, where not to extend it. And that's actually something that we will have to consider in our next P O C D in 2024. That's now required by statute that going forward, you have to make some considerations to your sewer system. So it's not a subject we, can continue to not look at. But so in looking at our P O C D, what I see is page 93, which is our future land use map, which shows the existing property, 751 Weed Street, as currently 1 unit per acre, and proposed to continue basically in that same vein as medium density, which is consistent with the 1/2 and 1 acre zones. So I don't see a need to facilitate a sewer extension when our plan did not foresee any change or proposed change in land use.
And if I could follow up with that too, as part of the implementation elements, part of the P O C D.
Can you explain that, please?
Well, there's two parts to the P O C D, the strategic element and the implementation element. And what I'm trying to say is that in the implementation element, it doesn't address any inconsistency or strategy for being able to implement that, because it understood, in my opinion, that it was medium density and that it would not change.
I mean, the other thing I'll say about medium density and 1/2 acre and 1 acre lots and even 2 and 4 acre lots is that those lots are large enough to allow for septic, which is probably why they are zoned that way outside of the sewer area. So again, if this was an area of town that we foresaw higher density development, we probably wouldn't have zoned it appropriate such that it could accommodate a septic system in the future.
Just add that I think I'd be concerned about the precedent that this creates as well. We're going to be, the town would be paying in perpetuity for that 135 additional feet of pipe. And so that there's obviously a cost that we bear that's associated with that in perpetuity. The precedent that we create is that for any applicant that comes before us that wants to do a similar project, whether it be an additional 10 feet of pipe or 300 feet of pipe, that it should be our cost to bear in perpetuity. And I think that's a real issue in terms of planning.
Yeah, I mean, I know we're not here tonight to discuss capacity and that is the purview of the WPCA, so I don't want to get into it too much, but I think that it is that we can't continue to divorce the two. I think planning has to consider our sewer capacity going forward because this town does not have unlimited sewer capacity. We do have an upper limit, and by some accounts, we're approaching that upper limit. And to your point, James, if development doesn't pay its cost of the infrastructure going forward, then the taxpayers all pay to fix the problem on the back end.
Yeah.
And so, whether it's with this application or with the next POCD, we, like I said, we really need to start considering sewer capacity in our planning.
Great.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
John, I can just make a couple comments just in terms of the consistency of the project. One of the things that I was focused on was looking at the conservation element of the plan and the balance between open space and impervious surfaces. And if you look at the locational map on 93 and then page 90 in the density maps, the Cross and VD zones that were rezoned for higher density development, I think we're done. The concept there was there's a lot of impervious space that is in the center of town that is adjacent to the water treatment plant in terms of proximity. And it would take parking lots and other sort of industrial uses and convert it into higher density, not, taking open space. And other sewer capacity or septic capacity and taking it offline. So I think that sort of urban infill aspect of the plan supports the idea of concentrating apartments towards that apartment zone. If you look, from a extension perspective, this particular sewer is kind of in the upper leftmost portion of the town while the treatment plant is in the lower right. So it's really not proximate to that center core treatment, which I think should be considered, if we kind of want to extend from the service area. Because if you think about if there's additional capacity coming through that area, it puts strain on the downtown versus having, for example, where the Avalon development is on Lakeview, where you have much more proximate direction towards the treatment plant. So I think logistically, it's kind of at the far reaches of the system, which I think could have compounding effects in other areas that may be aged.
Sorry, so just to add one thing, in terms of that concern of setting a precedent of a shift between what is now a private cost to a public cost. I think one could look at potentially other examples in town, Canaan Parish, maybe Milford, maybe there's other examples where town has taken on that public cost, so additional sewer pipe extensions, and the town has decided to go forward with that. I think the difference between this situation and those situations is who has agency. In those situations, the town had agency. It was under its purview and it's under discretion to bear that additional cost because they thought there was a public good that would have that constituted making implementing that plan. Here, the agency is either it's a developer, or if it's a private individual family, it's much different than the town having agency over those types of decisions. So I think if there's going to be a shift and a precedent and a shift between what is now a private cost and what would potentially become a public cost, the agency really needs to reside with the town, and that's not the case here.
Mr. Chairman, how does this work in terms of making, do we take a vote? Do we make a motion? I don't remember
So-
how we make.
So what we'll do is, although I'd like to provide some more comments, but let me
Yes.
answer your question. So what we need to, I guess, well, let me ask a question. So far, what I'm hearing is reasons for a negative referral to the WPCA. And any commissioners who feel there should be a case made for a positive referral to WPCA? Okay. So that's step one. Step two will then be for us to provide reasoning. Both general, but again, as I said earlier, and we've been doing it, so I'm comfortable with this, is we should refer to specific sections in the POCD.
Yes.
And then what we'll do is Planner Avni, working along with Attorney Gelderman, will then produce a report based upon our discussions tonight. They'll produce a draft, and then we'll discuss it at our meeting on, I didn't write down the date, June
Regular.
28th, right? Yeah, June 28th. And then we would vote on it, and then that would effectively accomplish the referral to the WPCA. Before we go forward with that, though, something I'd like to talk about is providing for a diverse housing portfolio, which starts on page 66, 67, 68, 69. And partly goes to, in a way, partly what Mr. Bash was talking about with Canaan Parish is what's engendered in this section is the town's efforts to produce and address the challenges of affordable housing. And in developing this, and you see it in the section, and you've heard me say this before, is, the town, my opinion, has a very commendable record. And Mr. Turner mentioned the implementation element. So it was the strategic element, and then implementation, and of course, other very important groups within town, particularly New Canaan Housing Authority, is acting upon this POCD. We have pursued a strategy of developing on our terms, and the language is in the POCD, which says that we should pursue affordable housing based upon how we as a commission in a broader town should achieve it. And we should pursue opportunities. And so, for example, and I know it's a sore subject right now, but we have achieved a series of moratoriums. And that was part of the POCD. And what that then enabled us to do is to then give us more latitude in terms of where we do pursue affordable housing and not have it thrust upon us. So, for example, page 69, D, seek solutions which do not invoke A30J. Canaan Parish is a good example. Canaan Parish was, sort of hate this term, but sort of a win-win. You had a situation where we needed more affordable housing, and you had an area of town which, was able to combine it and achieve that. In here is our housing trust fund, which we're one of the few towns in the state of Connecticut that have done that. We have incentive housing overlay zone. We have not done that, but we did pass affordable housing regulations. So my point is, within this POCD is a strategy to increase affordable housing in the town of New Canaan. And by having an affordable housing project placed upon an area that we do not think is appropriate for that area, from a zoning perspective, also from a gateway perspective, gateways is in our POCD. I do not think this is appropriate with the sense of having gateways to the town of New Canaan. So, I think the entire strategy here renders a development, talking again on a referral basis, not talking about an A30G application, talking about a referral basis, does not produce the conditions for a positive referral.
I would make one expansion, Mr. Chairman. You mentioned a strategy for affordable housing. I would expand it. We have a successful, proven, I think, state leading strategy for affordable housing. The items you had mentioned, we were among the first in the state to do it. And recently, when we changed some of our zoning laws to require payment or affordable housing to be built for denser development, to use a generic term. And I know at Canaan Parish, I was privileged to tour it when it was first opened, which is just absolutely fabulous housing. So it's not just housing, but it's very high quality housing, which also is enhancing quality of life with better traffic flow, areas for children to play, since our children living there and so forth. So it's not just a place to live, but it's a total living environment. So I think it's those types of success stories that are really part of the New Canaan story that we should be highlighting.
And we, of course, to that point, is we have multifamily zones. And once again, we've encouraged, it's not as if this is a town where we're not allowing multifamily. That's completely incorrect. We also have a strategy, again, coming out of the POCD for ADUs. And, not everybody's wild about the way we handle the ADUs, but you have the ability to do ADUs. So, I think my point here, and Attorney Gelderman, you can comment on the appropriateness or the inappropriateness of that. But, I think the fact that we have a strategy does not support then placing an affordable housing development where we don't think it belongs. Again, not talking about an A30G application, but talking about a referral to the WPCA. I mentioned gateways, that's page 36. Page 16, a sense of openness. I'm not convinced that this contributes to a sense of openness, which on page 16 is a key objective of the P O C D. Page 38, appropriate downtown development. To that point, we are encouraging multifamily housing in specific areas of town. We have done studies in multiple areas of town, which encourage that. But once again, it is not located where this property is located.
That's what I'm trying to think of our last regular meeting. We took action to allow the creation of some studio and some one bedroom and former offices in the very much in the downtown area. It's a main street that's about as downtown as it gets. So we certainly have checked those boxes more than once.
And then again, I think on page 66, where it specifically mentions zones where higher density multifamily development would be encouraged. This is outside of those zones. And this is where multifamily and or higher density developments should specifically be discouraged. And again, a reference to page 66.
Pages 44 and 45, have we brought those pages up yet? Okay, so pages 44 and 45. Once again, reference on a map basis. Specific recommendations. Not all has to do with affordable housing. But once again, the subject property, well, near this is not part of it. Did we mention page 56? We should monitor residential regulations. Now, this is not specific to the issue at hand, but the point is, once again, is you'll see at the top of the page, protect residential neighborhoods. I think we talked about page 57.
Chairman, I'd also suggest page 95, where we speak to the idea of whether the plan's consistent with the state conservation and development in terms of growth principles. There are a few that jump out to me here. One, it's principle 4, conserve and restore the natural environment. So, given the current openness of that particular region of town, open space, historical resources consistent with that. And then principle 5, protect the environmental assets, which highlights the idea of stresses water quality and public watershed lands. So I think the concept of monitoring the use of sewer and other extensions is key there. So
one thing I want to return to is Mr. Turner's comments on the implementation element. And so what happened back then was we formed an implementation committee. Gene Grislecki led that committee. And once again, we had a section of that implementation element had to do with affordable housing. And we largely agreed after a couple of years of working on the implementation element that we had largely achieved. And what I mean by achieved was not finished, but got things going. Clearly, we haven't finished what we need to do, but we got things going. So we can reference that.
When I think I mentioned it verbally, but I'm not sure I gave a page number. Page 90 is the only place that we discuss sewer capacity in the P O C D. And like I said, it doesn't say much, but it does recognize that sewage capacity is a constrained resource. Meaning that we don't have an unlimited amount, and therefore probably we can't just be extending it, without good reason.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I think we should add page 13 on preserve and enhance community character. um, the, and also include the downtown village district guidelines, the design guidelines. This site is fairly close to downtown, and there should be some guidance there as far as scale, mass, and impact on the neighborhood. And on the community character, I think the density of a 100+ unit development along this view corridor and the proximity to the Gore's Pavilion as far as a modern building, which gets into the historic fabric of New Canaan. I think that the relationship between our roads, the landscape, the site, and the structures that sit upon that site are very important. And I would challenge, or I would say that by increasing the density beyond the medium density that it's already planned for, could have a big impact on this relationship to the site, to the buildings in New Canaan, in our countryside. And I believe that it could become a threat to the moderns and ultimately impact tourism and would be a huge impact on that balance of nature, residences, and our scenic roadways. So I think that we need to add page 22 on the preservation of historic structures, along with the community character as part of our reasoning for preserving and keeping that site medium density.
Anybody else? Mr. Canag, Mr. Cassavant, anything in Zoom land you would like to add?
Not me.
This is Commissioner Cassavant. I concur with all of the points here pointing to a negative report that have been made so far tonight.
Okay.
I was just gonna say, I mean, we just went through a bunch of stuff in the POCD, but then, just to comment on what I think good planning looks like in this context, and I don't see any additional benefit to our overall planning in the town to extending the sewer system in this place. We're not giving access to any new properties that we're contemplating needing access. There was no planned change in the surrounding land use, not even just on this site, but the surrounding land use is planned to stay the same. And the applicant has said that the extension is a preference, but not a necessity. So there's really no, from my planning perspective, no additional benefit from this extension.
Planner Abney, anything at your end? Any comment?
No, I think you guys have said everything.
Okay.
Said every-
Attorney Gelderman.
Yeah, I think what'll happen obviously is I will attempt with Lynn to take these comments that you've made tonight, and help her draft a report that will come back. I would suggest to the members of the commission that in the interim, take a look at the POCD, maybe in a little more depth. And then when we come back with a report, it's going to be your report. You're going to possibly edit it and then ultimately vote on it. If there's things in there that you think are wrong or you'd like to add, you'll have that opportunity, I think, on the 28th. But we'll try to draft a report that incorporates the comments that everybody has made.
Can we get a draft before the meeting?
Sure. If just so you know, if I give you a draft,
It's in the public.
it's available if Attorney Hollister wants a copy as well. So
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, we can post it like we did for the library application. We could post the draft online and we can edit it live on the screen like we did for
Sure.
resolution, so everyone can see it happening.
I mean, tell me where I'm wrong, but my view is if a draft is out there and Attorney Hollister sees it, we're in regular session, so
No, it's fine.
Not really.
It's
with all
a
due
public
respect, it's not relevant.
it's a public document. It's, yeah, so. But
Okay.
but I would suggest that as a method if the commission agrees.
Say again?
I would suggest the draft and then letting you review it, edit it and vote on a final product.
Okay. Okay, commissioners, anything else?
One question on timing. So we're going to be discussing and we hope deciding on this on the 29th. From
28th.
28th. From the clock is running on this, and so that is the day we need to do it on that day, or.
You said
see if
35
there's
days?
a,
35 days from the referral, which I think was the day
Week
after.
ago,
I'm not sure what the letter from
the 9th,
9th.
okay. So 7 days ago.
So by July 13th.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Rabbit's clearly quicker with numbers than I am.
Hence the stock market. No, I'm just kidding. That was a low.
on market too.
Gosh, yeah, the bonds haven't been doing very well either. Gosh, anyway, I digress.
So the idea is that's game day.
Yes. Yeah.
The day we would.
Well, yeah, it's game day. I think what could happen, which as you know, we've done before, is we could discuss the document, get all the substance correct. Oh, no, we'd have to vote. And I wouldn't want to, yeah, it's game day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, conceivably, we could have another special meeting if there was a lot of work to be done, but we'd have to take a vote. So ideally, it's game day.
Because of that, this is why I would agree with the effort to have a draft created sooner rather than later, posted so we can comment. So we're not in
Absolutely.
detailed edit mode at that meeting, which becomes cumbersome in my view.
Yeah, I think that's right.
I don't think Lynn should go to sleep tonight until it's done.
We'll have a report at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning, Lynn.
7:30.
Okay, everybody good?
Good.
Okay, this meeting's adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.